serve every single state, county across the United States. And together, we're fighting hunger in our community. We're working with local food shelves, with meal programs such as Loaves and Fishes, and other hunger relief programs across, trying to make sure that we are meeting folks where they need it, where they need that support, and making sure they have the food that they need to thrive. So since the pandemic onset, or prior to that, as I mentioned, or as you mentioned, I've been with Second Harvest Heartland for 10 years. So when I started with Second Harvest Heartland, it was right during the Great Recession in 2009. And at that time, hunger relief was very prevalent. This time with the pandemic impact, it's way worse. We have not seen this level of need since the Great Depression. So before the pandemic hit, we were supporting 1 in 11 Minnesotans that was experiencing food insecurity. And that means that it's different than famine. It's different than hunger that you see perhaps in other countries or other causes. These are folks that just, with all the different burdens, we all have our budgets and we all have expenses that pop up, but just don't have enough to cover all their food needs. They may be skipping meals. They may not know they have enough food for the weekend. Their kids may not have enough food. And they're just, when that happens, you're eating, probably not healthy choices. You're probably picking the cheapest food you can find just to have food. So 1 in 11 Minnesotans is who we were serving. Since the pandemic started and folks, that previously were employed, gainfully employed, or, living week to week, paycheck to paycheck, suddenly that source of income went away. And so now we are serving 1 in 8 Minnesotans and disproportionately 1 in 5 children. So as you think about kids in your neighborhood or, at school or in your community, knowing that 1 in 5 is going home and there's not enough food in the home is heartbreaking. And so it's made a huge impact. And we know that this impact, such as, what happened with the Great Recession, it will take years before we get back to the level we were pre-pandemic in the number of folks that we were serving. So that means that an additional 275,000 Minnesotans now are going to face food insecurity, especially with winter, the onset of winter and the additional expenses that happen there with heat, with, car repairs that come up, just additional expenses with the holidays. That's a huge surge in need. And that includes 112,000 kids. So really tricky right now, as we all know, with the changes in kids learning from home or hybrid learning, getting meals to kids, which is a really great way to meet the needs of folks that are food insecure, is very difficult right now. Kids aren't in school to get those free meals. So how do we get the food to the kids that need it? And thankfully, we have a great team at Second Harvest Heartland and across the community that are working together and innovate and figure out, how do we do this work together? How do we get the food to folks that need it and take that extra burden off families right now? So this is a busy infographic, but it has some really good nuggets that I wanted to talk about with you. So as I mentioned, we've experienced a really big increase in demand, and I think it was almost immediately, right as everything was shutting down back in March. That spike in need happened right away because suddenly folks were without that source of income, that they've been relying on to buy those quick groceries every week. So we've seen and experienced a 30% increase in demand from our food shelf partners. So we serve about 1,000 partner programs, food shelves, and other meal programs. They were seeing 2 to 3 times the number of people coming through their doors. That's a 60% increase in the number of people that they're trying to serve in their communities, and the need is great. As we mentioned earlier, pre-pandemic, Second Harvest Heartland, we were serving about 532,000 people in partnership with those programs I was mentioning, our food shelf partners. So now that looks like 735,000 people. So it's a huge increase, but the good news is that we've got great partners in place. We've got resources in place, but a lot of that also hinges on the community continuing to support us, as well as some federal support, which right now we're eyeing really closely with the hopefully next round of stimulus funding to come through and what that might mean for families that have that strict budget. We also know, and especially with the civil unrest that happened this summer with the killing of George Floyd, BIPOC communities are hit more disproportionately than other communities with this issue of hunger. It's more severe and it's more difficult at times to make sure that they get the food they need to thrive. We had a really cool pilot partnership this summer where with the onset of the pandemic and, with the restrictions and having volunteers come and help, Second Harvest Heartland we usually have a good couple hundred volunteers not every single day, but about 5 days of the week, helping to repack food. We get large donations of things like, apples and carrots and, other food items, and volunteers help us do that work. When everything shut down, we didn't have those volunteers, and so our work had to shift and pivot to having things pre-packed. With the safety considerations, we need to make sure that we could put food in boxes, seal it up, distribute that to our food shelf partners so that they in turn could have people drive up, open their trunks, kind of like you do if you order, items to go at Target, put it in their trunk, and then they could take off from there. That's the kind of delivery we had to do. Pre-pandemic, food shelves would have more of it almost looked like a mini grocery store inside. If you've ever volunteered at your local food shelf, you would know what I'm talking about. There's fresh produce, there's, milk and dairy, there's protein, there's a variety of things. Well, when everything changed, we couldn't do that. They couldn't do that work. And so it had to be very formulaic, more of a drive-through model. And we've done, more than 300,000 of those now, because now we're seeing that they need additional support in communities because the food shelves can't do enough to support the needs of those clients. So we've had pop-up grocery distribution events. Again, as I mentioned earlier, in key neighborhoods that were impacted by civil unrest, such as Powderhorn. We worked with local hunger relief organizations in those communities and worked together to put on a really huge produce distribution event to start, and then included other nutritional items like dairy and protein and other, non-perishable food items to make sure that people had the food that they needed to fulfill all their needs at home. With grocery stores gone, convenience stores gone, what do you do to make sure that you're going to meet the needs of your family and feel safe too at the same time? So back to the story in North Minneapolis that I was describing earlier. We worked with North Point, Northside Achievement Zone, and identified families that even with those extra food distributions and those opportunities, there were families that couldn't access those and they were running out of food. And Northside Achievement Zone was having to pivot, go out, buy food, drop off groceries at the doorsteps of these families' homes just so that they had enough food to eat because they were running out and it was getting very desperate. So we worked with funding from Wells Fargo. We worked out some additional partners, of which some are on this call today. Chow Grills Catering, shout out to you. But worked to provide them with prepared meals as well as these boxes of groceries that I was mentioning earlier, and do a delivery system, so home delivery. And we were serving about 150 families for about 8 weeks as a pilot program to see what would the impact be. And it was huge. Families were getting the food sources they needed. And they were thriving and staying healthy. And that's so important right now. We all know that right now. We have to do the basic things, with the pandemic happening, but how much more difficult it is if you don't have enough food in your home. So anyway, really cool innovation. And our CEO, Allison, says, we're innovating every single minute of every day because the game keeps changing. We have to do our work differently. But the good news is, like I mentioned, that innovation is happening. We're finding new ways to get food to folks that need it. And I'm really excited to tell you about an innovative program, Minnesota Central Kitchen, which I hope I will do good justice to. And please chime in if there's other things I've missed, but really excited to share that program with you. So if anyone is familiar with World Central Kitchen, and Chef Jose Andres, who has worked on a national and worldwide level with local chefs and restaurants, caterers, when there had been disasters, so think of hurricanes or the fires out in California, work together to bring meals to people at that moment where they desperately need it. And so thinking of that model and thinking of, when everything was shutting down back in March, here's all these kitchens that had, freezers full, refrigerators full of food, suddenly with nowhere to go. And then also folks that were, facing that unemployment suddenly, and what were they going to do? So idle kitchens. So our friends at Chow Grills Catering reached out. We had some other folks within our organization that decided, you know what, let's put that food to good use. We have a really robust food rescue program, which was starting to work with hospitality partners to make sure that food wasn't going to waste. We weren't throwing away really great, nutritious food that was safe to eat, but just, didn't have a place to go. So thankfully, through working with Chow Grills and then getting some additional kitchen sites through corporations like, United Health Group and their corporate kitchen and cafeteria, where they normally were serving meals to thousands of employees. Cargill was another partner, firing up those kitchens, getting those chefs back in the kitchen and their support staff to make meals, to make really robust, healthy, prepared wonderful meals, gourmet meals to serve out in our community and work in partnership with Loaves and Fishes. And as they had to pivot their model from having people come in and dine in for free food, they were having to do grab and go, just like we're doing right now with our favorite restaurants, ordering up and grabbing and go with the food. So we've surpassed 1.1 million meals since that program began, just out of a quick idea and a quick need to use up that excess food and hopefully get kitchens back to work. We've had about 179 people employed. They're working, they're preparing those meals, working with some really amazing partners in addition to Chow Girls Catering, David Fema, who is the chef and inspiration for many restaurants, and as well as the food service at Target Center for Timberwolves games. The sous chef on Lake Street preparing indigenous appropriate food, and putting that together. So it's providing food to people that is nutritious, it's warm, and just really welcome. We all know what it's like to be able to have a cooked meal that we don't have to cook ourselves right now, to be able to have that warm meal and just the warmth that brings. I know there was a recent story, we're working in partnership with Involve Minnesota to serve people that are homeless or living in those encampments that we've been seeing on the news, and the impact of being able to give a warm meal to those folks, and just knowing that this feels like a meal that somebody would prepare for their own family. It just really just a big difference than that. I think I heard a speaker say the other day that frozen bologna sandwich, much better to have a nice warm meal instead. So really cool innovation there.
Heather, I just have one question for you. Since the pandemic, seeing that like online grocery ordering has risen exponentially, and because of that, it has caused the need for food storage and cold storage to increase. Has that affected you in how you store things as well?
Definitely. Really exciting, in the past couple of years, we've been in the middle of a capital campaign. We were renovating a new facility over in Brooklyn Park that was about 3 times the size of what we had been operating out of in Maplewood. And a huge part of that is to have big increases in refrigeration and freezer storage, in addition to, just normal storage of non-perishable food items. So thankfully, we had that additional space. We had just moved in March, and then everything changed, right? So that is huge for us, but it's also critically important for our food shelf partners and other hunger relief partners to also have that additional storage. More than half of the food that we distribute pre-pandemic, and I'm sure that it's probably still true during the pandemic, it's fresh food. It's not all non-perishable food items. So you're right, having that refrigeration and freezer storage is critically important. So we have 2 really large, you can drive a forklift through it, refrigeration units over at Second Harvest Heartland in our warehouse, as well as that was that huge freezer storage. So we're receiving, huge donations of that fresh items. We can put that in there. We can then distribute that out through refrigerated trucks to our partners. But it really is very critical to make sure that as we're getting those large sources of food, our partners are able to then store that and distribute it as well. So it's definitely an ecosystem.
And then just one more quick question. Do you see Minnesota Central Kitchen remaining in operation when the pandemic hopefully ends soon?
Yeah, good question. We have, and thanks to our board, we've committed to going through our 2021 fiscal year, which ends September 30th. So I think we're all watching and seeing, the continued impact of that particular program and the need for prepared meals, and then continuing to reassess. Just like any of us with a pilot program or new innovation at our companies, we're waiting and seeing, where we might need to continue to pivot, or where this is really providing a good source of nutrition and needs to continue. So something we're definitely watching.
Thank you.
So that brings me to how can you help? Certainly donations, not only for ourselves, but your local food shelf or other charity of your choice are critically important right now. At Second Harvest Heartland, we can turn $1 into 3 meals. So your donation goes quite far. And you can see on that quick chart how that can ramp up really quickly. In the bio, it was mentioned, employee workplace giving is really important. If you hopefully have a really robust workplace giving program where you work and are able to give maybe through payroll deduction or a one-time donation. We have ways where you can run a virtual drive. We have really easy tools on our website where you can send a quick email out with a link and people can donate online. So really taking that whole in-person, situation out of the equation, at least for this year, but still teaming together to fight hunger together. A couple other big ways are, follow us on our social media channels and share and repost the information about building awareness of the issue of hunger in our community and how people can help is critically important. When it's safe to do so, we would love to have people come and volunteer with us again. We are shut down at the moment for outside volunteers until mid-January, but once things improve, we need all hands on deck. We need a lot of help. And so our website, toharvest.org, is another way that you can take a look. And if you have time into the new year, we'd love to have you come out. The other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, we're eyeing really carefully what's going to happen with this additional round of federal stimulus funding and the impact that will have. A critical one is the moratorium on evictions, and hoping there is some additional support there. If that doesn't happen, it's going to be pretty devastating for a lot of families, especially with, the brutal winter coming ahead. I think I saw, 15 degrees for a high next week. That's really devastating. And not only will it affect people's housing situation, obviously it affects their ability to buy food for their families and stay safe and stay healthy during this pandemic. And so use your voice. If you know your local legislator, if you haven't ever reached out to your local legislator, this is the time. Go out on their website, share why you feel hunger relief is important, why this additional stimulus is important. It will take all of us to share our voice. I think we've seen that in the past several months with the election and other things happening. Let's use our voices. That's something we can all do and reach out to our legislators. So we would appreciate that as well. I think that's what I have to share. Any other questions or ideas for us? We are always, like I mentioned, innovating every single minute of it, every day. And I would say our corporate community has stepped up, and individuals, to help us do the work we're doing right now. The donations coming through have been amazing, nothing short of amazing. But as I mentioned earlier, we know this need is going to continue for years to come. So we definitely rely on that support. But it is a huge motivation for our team. So on behalf of our team at Second Harvest Heartland, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you. If you've made a donation, even if you haven't, just supporting this cause and this issue is so important, and we really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Heather. Any last questions at all? You can put them in the chat.
I'll just unmute and ask, do you think Minnesota Central Kitchen will add partners in, like more like catering or restaurants or stuff like that as the year goes on?
Yeah, great question. And there has been movement. As I mentioned earlier, we had some corporate cafeterias. A lot of corporations have really, closed down, having their employees mainly work from home. It's moved more into catering situations or catering kitchens, and also restaurants, that are shuttered, that are willing to open their doors. So we have an evolving group of folks that are able to do it. About 60% of the food that they're preparing is through that food rescue program that I was mentioning earlier. So there is a need to purchase foods. Think of, spices, ingredients, not normally the thing that gets donated. So there is a need to purchase some of the food that they're using to prepare the meals, as well as the equipment and the PPE, as you can imagine. So there is some, financial commitment to be a part of it. But where we can support them and where we can do that work together, we definitely want to do that. But yeah, it's averaged, anywhere from 10 to 15 sites and partners on board. And but we, definitely, if you know of someone that you think would be interested, we would love to have that conversation, and I'm happy to connect folks to the right person.